Hello everyone and welcome to today's ATM virtual webinar on the effects that COVID-19 could have on food-driven travel. I'm Simon Ritchie, editor of Caterer Middle East magazine, and I'm delighted to be joined by an expert panel of foodies based in the Middle East and Singapore to get a sense for what we can expect in the next year. In today's session, we're going to take a look at the F&B industry as it stands right now, with dine-in regulations changing week to week, bans on large groups of people meeting, and many people still self-isolating in fear because of the pandemic. Just what does need to happen for things to get back to normal here in Dubai? We'll be discussing how likely it is that we will see food-driven travel from this region outwards, and asking if the rest of the world will be coming here to Dubai. Of course, this is all dependent on air travel returning to normal in the near future. And if it doesn't, then what will restaurants in the Middle East do to attract its captive audience and make them put down the meal kits and dine out? To facilitate this discussion today, I'm excited to be joined by this fantastic panel. We have Samantha Wood, who's of course the face behind impartial restaurant review website Food Diva. I'm joined by acclaimed food writer Courtney Brandt, also known as A to Zatar. We also have the VP of Food and Beverage for JA Resorts, Rob Cunningham. And to give us the perspective from Singapore, we have food writer Evelyn Chen. Thanks you all so much for joining me today. Now, we will be taking your questions at the end of the session, so please use the Q&A box to pose anything you'd like to the panel, and we'll try and get through as much as we can before the end of the session. Right, let's dive right in. Now, everyone knows we have an industry in turmoil at the moment, but recently here in Dubai, we've started to see a slackening of lockdown rules, and most restaurants are beginning to open up again, albeit with social distancing in play. Now, Samantha, we know you love a poll and you've been asking your followers about their thoughts on the situation lately. I believe you did a poll just over a week ago as things started to open up. What was the feedback you received in terms of dining out at the moment?
Thanks, Simon. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I do love my polls. Social media makes it quite easy to run those. So I ran a one-day poll on the 19th of May, to be exact. So that was just, to put it into perspective, that was just before Eid and the 8 p.m. curfew announcement, when we were still on sort of 10 p.m. lockdown. Approximately 2,000 votes across 4 social channels. Now that showed that only 37% were pro dining out, meaning 63 against. Now what's interesting here is I asked the same question a month prior and it was a complete reversal. So from feedback that I'm getting, this is down to a mixture of fear, lack of clarity on precautionary safety and hygiene measures, and obviously a drop in disposable income. Now, since then, restrictions have eased a little bit. Alcohol is now permitted. So for instance, restaurants over the weekend, in particular DIFC, were as busy as safe distancing would allow. And that is reassuring. Now, I'm expecting though that this will continue for this month. And then July, flight routes are going to start opening up, and that's when the mass exodus will start. So it may be short-lived.
What kind of impact do you think that could have then?
In terms of restaurants here?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're going into a quiet season anyway. Obviously, COVID is impacting that even more. So I really don't see restaurants sort of reopening fully until sort of September, October time.
Now, as you said, there is a sense of a kind of climate of fear in terms of people going out. We've had Courtney here. You recently dined out at, I believe it was Skillini. What was your impression? How was the feeling? How did it compare to before? You know, what did you think of it? Would you do it often? What was the atmosphere like? Just what was the overall impression that you got?
Yeah, and thank you for having me again this morning. I thought it would be more crowded than it was. So I am an early diner anyway. I chose to dine at 12:30 for a lunch because I wanted to drive myself. Now, everything, there are a lot of precautions in place, but for me personally, I wanted to be in control of the whole experience. So I drove myself there. At the time, the Four Seasons Restaurant Village did not have valet in place, so we parked ourselves. As we approached the lift that goes down to Skillini, All the signage was in place, so it's very clearly marked how to approach the restaurant. Once we got in the lift, there was sanitizer there. From exiting the lift and the walk to the restaurant, you approach the hostess and you get your temperature scanned. Then you're greeted and we were shown to our seat. It's very clearly marked how things were socially distanced. I asked, when do I take my mask off? I don't think there's enough clarity around that. My waiter told me whenever I was comfortable. Throughout the experience, we were there for about an hour and a half, and 2 other tables joined. So at the time we left, I think 5 people total were in the restaurant. So I think it was nice to go out. I think all the precautions were done as I expected, but as somebody who used to dine out 2 or 3 times a week, I think I might be more in the case of once a week going forward.
What would you say was the biggest difference or disappointment? What is it that's putting you off the most?
I like a quiet restaurant. I think a lot of people go out to be a part of something and to be a part of that experience, but I go out for the food. So if you're going out for the ambiance, to be a part of something bigger, to be a part of that collective, you might be a little disappointed. If you're like me and you're going for the food and to enjoy the act of somebody making something for you, something that you can't do at home, I think you're going to be in a good place.
Rob, if I can bring you in here, in terms of, obviously said you are the VP of F&B at J Resorts and Hotels. Can you tell us about what the F&B there is like at the moment? Are you opened up? Are you close to normal? Are you seeing visitors? What's the situation?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Simon. Listen, things are starting to open up, as Samantha said and Courtney said. But, under these current circumstances, financially, as Samantha touched on, restaurants can't survive with 4 or 5 people, doing a lunch service. The numbers just for the kitchen and the service team alone, let alone, food, produce, and so on, and implementation of a menu and, just the running costs of electricity and all the on costs associated to it, it's not feasible. So things are going to have to ramp up fairly quickly. We are starting to open up. We have opened up out of the resort now that the beaches are open, and people are starting to come out to that facility because it's the first break of being out of apartments and having some social interaction and some experience of hotels and staycations again. Of course, Dubai needs to have that international market to facilitate its hotels and its restaurants. So we need to get those numbers back through Dubai, as Samantha was saying, to make it a financial, viable tourist attraction again. UAE and Dubai Tourism, of course, are very focused on this, and they are taking every measure possible. And most hotels, freestanding restaurants are going to have to work on the back of everybody else bringing the tourists in, because as Samantha said, Dubai's unique proposition isn't somewhere like New York, London, Sydney, or anywhere else in the world where we have enough local domestic consumers to facilitate operations of our restaurants to make them financially viable. We rely heavily on the tourists, so we need to get that back in place.
Evelyn, if I can bring you in now, obviously you're based in Singapore. Having heard from the other panelists on what Dubai is like at the moment, can you give us a breakdown on where Singapore is right now? And I believe you said that the lockdown is off. Are things returning to normal?
Sure. Hi, thank you for the question, Simon. This is Evelyn Chen from Singapore. We have been on lockdown in Singapore from early April. It's been really painful to see the F&B industry suffering. But the very interesting thing about the restaurants in Singapore is that a lot of them have jumped on the takeout and delivery bandwagon. I think almost all the casual to fine dining restaurants I know are delivering, even the 3 Michelin star restaurants. Now, some of them are creating a completely different menu for takeout, and others are just dishing out, old favorites from their existing menu. So different people are doing different things. Today is the first day that the circuit breaker has ended, but it is not, restaurants are not allowed to resume business yet. There are 3 phases to the reopening of our economy, and today is the first day. Restaurants will be allowed to operate from phase 2 onwards, but we do not have a date yet. It all depends on whether the number of cases will improve after our economy open for phase 1.
In terms of certainly delivery and takeaway has been a very hot topic here in Dubai, so we won't talk too much about aggregators for this panel. But Evelyn, I want to know in terms of consumer confidence in takeaway and delivery, is it there in Singapore? Are people happy and feel safe doing takeaway and delivery?
You know, when restaurants first started serving takeouts and deliveries, the response was a bit slow at the beginning. And then it started to pick up because there's this energy among the local consumers to want to support local F&B. It is a very, very, very strong energy. We want to support the restaurants that we love. And even on social media, we have this hashtag Save F&B Singapore, SG. And I think we are all very encouraged to want to help the F&B in Singapore survive. And the business started building up. And I have to say that, but even at best, when the restaurants serving takeouts are very, very busy, sales revenue is coming in at about just 50% of pre-COVID levels, which is really not great. You can't survive on that kind of revenue. But yeah, even as we speak, they are doing fine. Takeouts are doing fine, and it depends on what they're serving. Some restaurants have, completely eradicated their tasting menus and just serving pies, which I think is a great idea because pies travel so well. And when you receive them, you just pop them into the oven. So it all depends on what they're serving.
Thanks, Evelyn. Samantha, as Evelyn said there, places can't survive on takeaway and delivery alone. That's why we're so keen to see dine-in open up. We're listening to Courtney's experience and obviously your own experiences dining out. And what do you think restaurants need to do to make people more comfortable to dine out? I've seen Joy Gazal at the Main has been releasing videos showing everything that they're doing. Is that a good step to take?
Yes, of course. I mean, communication is key. I think what is very clear is that we have a lack of education here. Now, what I mean by that is government directives are changing all the time. There's lots of misinformation flying around. So hotels and restaurants really need to be following that. They need to be spelling out any change in directives along with their safety and hygiene precautions to reassure customers, because fear is a big component. So that regular communication is key. I mean, for instance, now you don't have to wear your masks in the restaurant. That's actually been made official now. You obviously have to wear it to get there if you're traveling with a group of people. But once you're there, you are free to take it off. So that, as an example, should be communicated. Also here, I mean, just another point, especially because we have Rob and we're talking hotels and it's Arabian Travel Market. We're in our hot summer period now. Restrictions need to ease up to allow the operations of pools and outdoor showers, because that will really encourage hotels and their day passes and be able to include an F&B element as well. Because at the moment you can only use the beach. There are strictly speaking, no outdoor showers. That's a very, very hot experience, to say the least.
I think we've got a fairly solid roundup of the situation as it is and where we feel we need to get to move forward in terms of dining in at restaurants. But to move on to the next phase and the main topic of this session in terms of how it will affect global travel and food-driven travel, I think we need another poll from Samantha. I believe you did one just yesterday to keep us up to date with what the hoi polloi are thinking. So what was the outlook?
Yeah, so this one was very reassuring, actually. Again, across 4 social media channels, 1,800 votes. 64% voted yes to traveling for food-driven experiences when flight routes open up. So this isn't just a case of, are you going to fly home to see your family? This was specifically to travel on holiday for a food-driven experience. So 64% yes, 36% again. So if we're to compare it with the other one, people are more likely to get on a plane than they are to go to a restaurant. But I'm hoping the restaurant one, if I was to conduct it now or next week, will slightly change.
What's your personal opinion? Have you got any plans to be heading to
I
Singapore?
cannot wait to get on a plane. I was one of the first to dine out as well. I think mental well-being is just as important as physical well-being. I struggled in the beginning. I found it was quite refreshing not to have to go to restaurants. It was a bit of a break for me, but a few days later that changed. So I was one of the first to dine out when they opened it up, and I have been dining out regularly for my own sanity, but also to support local restaurants as well. And yes, I will get on a plane. I will probably go home first. It will involve food, but I will travel and I will continue to try and lead my life as much as possible, given financial restrictions, obviously, because we're all impacted. But yes, yeah, it's time to move on.
Rob, oh, sorry. Yes, please. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I look at, you know, there's leaders in the food industry, and I'm in the fine dining sector is what's, you know, my kind of cup of tea as it is. I don't think it's the time for that. I look at someplace like Noma, who's changed themselves into a burger and fry joint, and I would still go visit them. There's a time and place for degustations and tasting menus, and I think that it might not happen until 2021 that I have one of those experiences, and I'm okay with that. I think restaurants, as Evelyn was saying, that pivot. So I could go to Odette maybe and get a delivery in Singapore, and that's Chef Julien, fantastic for him for keeping his team working. You know, we all have to pivot if there's going to be inbound or outbound people coming in. So it's just important that I like to see the leadership at that level to say there's a time and place for fine dining, and maybe we're not there right now.
Yeah, I would agree, Courtney, actually. And I think a food driven can mean different things to different people. I think we've seen the end of the tasting menu. I think what Noma is doing is groundbreaking. I would actually prefer to travel to Noma for the burger bar than I would for a tasting menu. Mm-hmm. So I think that is changing. What is key though is sort of traditional street food tours. And I think that's where Evelyn's feedback will be crucial, really, whether that's really going to come back given possible hygiene restrictions there.
Well, Evelyn, have you heard anything on that regard?
Well, as of now, none of the hawkers are, you know, allowed to sell directly to dine-in guests right now. They have reported to me that sales in general are down 50%. That's the hawkers, among the hawkers. So it's very, very difficult to see what it's going to be like when the hawkers are allowed to reopen. But a lot of them have started doing deliveries where in the past they have, you know, they were completely not open to it. So that may help. But, you know, the food tastes very different when you eat it at home than when you eat it in the hawkers.
Yeah.
Of course, so that's all part of the experience as well, isn't it? You know, you really want to be there. Rob, if we could bring you back in as well. As you mentioned earlier, you know, being part of hotels and resorts, you're really dependent on travellers coming into Dubai. What is the expectation over the summer in terms of what we can expect in terms of you filling your hotels?
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting proposition, and it's kind of falls into that, you know, what's going to exactly happen, and when are the flights going to happen, when is the period of isolation going to break out, and when, you know, then returns of confidence to that international traveler. I think, you know, it's interesting what Samantha, Courtney and Evelyn all said in regards to people coming for that food and beverage experience internationally. I think that people are going to move fairly quickly. I think the interesting factor, and being in Australia, catching up with a lot of my friends that are still in restaurants and still have their own restaurants, they've taken that model of what they traditionally have done. They've reassessed it for this current process to keep at least the employment of their staff and at least enough cash coming through the business. And most of them have done quite well. Some have done exceptionally well, turning into a completely different model than what they would traditionally do. And they've had great financial success. I think in this time, food and beverage people that are flexible and have the ability to look outside what they would normally do are going to survive. The models that feel that they can't change are maybe going to find it a little bit difficult to continue into this, you know, current unknown predicament, because nobody really knows what's going to happen. We don't really know what's going to happen this summer with tourists. We're hoping that we get the European tourists back in, and we're going to need that in Dubai. But, you know, to what level, nobody knows. Of course, not only our hotel, but all hotels and Dubai Tourism are in the marketplace and are working on that, you know, now to get that tourist back. We have to, I think that we touched on what the guests want to experience when they come in. I think they want to have, like what Samantha said, the most authentic experience as possible without being too clinical. I think, it's going to be a fine line of having enough hygiene and enough system in place to show the consumer that we are safe and we are working within boundaries. We have masks, but we don't want it to be too hospital-like. We still want to have a personality. We still want to engage them in the restaurant experience when they come in. I think that's going to be, the quick of it. We're going to have to do that on our feet as we have guests in. We need to maintain that restaurant identity, so it feels like a restaurant. It doesn't feel just like we're turned into hospital wards that are serving food. It could be too clinical. We're trying to maintain in our restaurants that we have that authenticity. We've done a lot of work in the last 12 months at JA to reinvent our food and beverage, working with a lot of chefs and employing a lot of restaurant background people. We want to maintain that as we come out of this and work forward into maintaining a strong food and beverage identity that is a restaurant and feels like a restaurant when you go into it. So it's going to be an interesting thing, how fast we want to move quickly. Of course, I think people are going to move very quickly. You see, Melbourne, Australia, where I was. Now I'm up in Avoca Beach and just out of Sydney. Things have opened up and people are back out on the streets very quickly. People are very quick to want to have that outside experience. They want to go to restaurants. They want to go to pubs and hotels to drink. Dubai is the same. People want to have a friendly drink with their friends. They want to catch up. Australia now can catch up in groups of 10. And I'd say within 2 weeks, they'll be moving fairly quickly. Economically, people will start to decide we have to live with COVID. That's going to be a part of our normal society now. And, as we go along, of course, there's going to be other groundbreaking things that come in will make it easier for us. But people will be economically, we need to start to work our businesses to live with COVID. So I think that hand in hand, we're going to be moving forward quicker. People kind of have a quick tolerance to turn things around. The days of like dragging things out have gone there. A couple of weeks ago, but I mean, we're not used to this kind of situation. People were going crazy in a month. Now we're like 2 months down the track. People are like, okay, I'm ready to go to a bar. I'm kind of the risk factor, like Samantha said, we'll take a bit more risk. I will go out to restaurants straight away. I was down at the fishmonger this morning getting Sydney rock oysters and fresh fish to cook dinner tonight because, and there's a lineup. The guy has never been so busy in his 20 years of business, which is fantastic. So certain businesses, their models have exceeded expectations during this process. And I think that we're going to see a very clever food and beverage operation moving forward in the future.
Rob, I was wondering to touch on what Evelyn and Courtney mentioned. Have you adapted your menus at all to deal with supplier issues at the moment, or just because of the current conditions? Have you done that?
Yeah, we have. We've done some adaptation based on what we can get in Dubai, based on, of course, this is an impact across all production of all food and beverage items. So, some of the items are going to disappear. Some will come back in a couple of months and some alternative products are there. But we've been pretty lucky with most of our operations. So far, we have found substitutes. Dubai is a big market. People are very willing to ship their product in there because they know it'll sell. So we're getting the produce that we need. We've had a few adaptations on things, but in general, it's quite good.
Evelyn, just to bring you back in terms of Singapore and the timeline. I know you said at the moment you're going towards stage 2, stage 3. At the moment, with restaurants not set for dining, is there a timeline in terms of when you think that might get back to normal and when people can expect to be able to travel to Singapore and to have those experiences?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay. Is there a timeline for restaurants reopening in Singapore?
No, it has not been announced, but we are anticipating early July. But that's it's just, anticipation on our part. Nothing has been announced. And, Singapore foodies just can't wait to, dine with a vengeance when restaurants open.
I can imagine. Rob, we've had a question in, so I think I'll pass this on to you right now. One of the consequences of COVID-19 will most likely be the eradication of buffets, or breakfast buffets in particular. In what way will this impact the tourism industry price-wise and experience-wise? That's from Raoul Bassavine, manager of the Benelux market into Jordan.
Right. I think that, well, you know, buffets are going to slowly and without too much sour. I'm not on my side. I'm one to move away from buffets very easily when the market will lend itself. So I'm quite happy to see the eradication of them. So currently you know, I'm not sure on the Saudi market. I mean, we have certain market segmentations in hotels that do like that buffet situation and set up, and we would have to look at that in the future. But currently, you know, it's working quite well in our 3 hotels that are open that we don't have buffets. We've put in, you know, set menus with an a la carte choice from the guests when they sit down, and certain items coming straight to the table, like bread baskets and fruits and yogurt, so that they've got a food item right there for them, and then an a la carte hot breakfast item coming to them. To me, I think it's a much better system anyway. I like it personally. I like something cooked fresh for me, clean. I'd much rather go to a breakfast set menu than a buffet. I think most people are going to be happy with that quality and that style in the interim, and then I guess that we'll see how it unfolds in the future. I mean, you know, it's hard to predict any of these things at the moment because we just don't know where it goes. But in a health and hygiene way, nobody at this current time wants to see food outside, you know, in the open, where it has the ability to attract any bacteria or any enzymes at all.
I'm seeing a lot of nods from the panelists. So yes, so Samantha, I guess the eradication of the buffet, you're quite happy to see that?
Gosh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it also minimizes food wastage as well.
Yeah,
which is
100%.
Exactly.
So gone are those long sort of 4, 5, 6 hour brunches across different restaurants in one hotel, overflowing buffets. It's all going to be table service. Definitely one of the silver linings of this crisis.
Yeah.
For you, Rob,
exactly.
though, was the breakfast or the buffet a value thing? Is it going to cost more to start providing a la carte meals, or can it be done at the same price?
I think you can do it at the same price, and I think actually, like Samantha said, you know, you're going to have less food wastage. You're going to have a more sensible operation. I mean, that's what we're talking about. You know, we have to streamline food and beverage now to maintain what it is that we're serving, and also what is our price point. You know, what can you actually get for a room night, and what can you actually get for a breakfast sale? And you're going to have to be sensible. So if a guest is paying, you know, a certain price point, they've got to have an understanding of what can be facilitated around that, you know. So, you know, to me, the buffets are always, you know, an over exaggeration, something they never appease most people that are coming for. If we're talking about the food destination experience, a buffet isn't going to meet that need. You know, if you're in Japan and you're having a traditional Japanese a la carte breakfast cooked for you in the morning, there's nothing better than that. And if you're on the streets of Lebanon having some pastries, nothing better than that. You know, these are the experiences I think that we're going to meet. It's like Samantha was saying, where the buffets were big, spread over multiple restaurants, you know, they'll be smaller but quality driven. We will be doing this anyway, and I presume that most people will be, and it'll be cooked a la carte, you know, to be literally. And nobody minds waiting 4 or 5 minutes for a dish to be cooked and then served to them. And nobody minds that. In fact, most people I know are going to be, especially the people on the panel and most guests, are going to be happy to wait 4 or 5 minutes, even 10 or 15, and come down with a table number, and they know that they can drop that food at a table. You know, it's a heightened experience. It's getting away from that stale buffets where the food doesn't meet your expectations. It's a high point, and people are only never that pleased with the experience. I think there's certain, and if we're looking at the different segmentations over the kind of things like a brunch, which Dubai is well known for, the focus on that is a party, is drinking, is a different experience, and then there'll be a food element to match that experience, and that just makes sense, right?
Yeah. Courtney, we've seen from Samantha's poll that certainly people are keen to get out and travel for food experiences if they can. However, if the situation does arise and it's not possible due to flights, for example, as it is possibly looking, you know, what will it take from your experience dining out, you've as I said, you've been out, but you said you would kind of lower the amount of times you went out with things as it is. What will it take to get back to a stage where you're happy to dine out 2-3 times a week?
There's not, I think Evelyn said it best, like there's the anticipation of when that day will come. It's going to be different for everyone. For me, I keep a keen eye on the numbers and the tests. And look, I'm a household of 2. I don't have children. I don't have immunocompromised family. So I think it's going to be different. I think it's a unique time in the community, in the F&B community, to really do their best, because I think Samantha pointed or touched on it. There's a loss of income. There really has to be value for money for that right now to get people into a restaurant and to get them to come back. And I think that that's probably going to be a major driver going through the summer and into the fall, that if I'm thinking, not for me, but school fees and getting on airline fees, those could be expensive, and all the rest of it, that kind of nice to have disposable income that might have gone to dining out is now reduced. So unfortunately for restaurants, they already have gone through a huge challenge keeping their people employed, keeping things healthy, keeping things safe. I think, again, it's an adaptation to, maybe we need comfort foods. Maybe you look at the menu and you streamline it. Maybe you change it to say what sells best, and let's just focus on that. It is a challenge. I'm going to do my part. I know Samantha's done her part with, we haven't brought up the hashtag UAE Restaurants Unite, which has got a lot of traction. So it's a two-way street, and my part of the community is to do whatever I can to promote the restaurants that are open, that are doing it right, that have something to offer the community.
Fantastic. Rob, I wanted to ask you as well, what's JA Resorts' plan then, if the case of there is a captive audience here in the UAE? Will you be promoting staycations with food involved? Is that how you get an audience here?
Yeah, we're working on, as we start to reopen the hotels and get an idea of what numbers we can slowly get through the resorts. Definitely a food orientated experience is going to be essential for us. On the JBR with like Motorino and Offside, they're very much local restaurants that have had great traction over the last 6 months before this went down, and same with that little Phoenicia restaurant by Greg. So we want to maintain those as local restaurants. Their price points were on point. Their expectations for food quality and service was being met. Of course, we're always trying to improve on those, but we want to maintain that around the JBR, that we have those local dining restaurants and bars. And then for the resort, yes, we definitely want to leverage on the ability to go there as a food destination, and highlighting with the our Italian restaurant there, Sete and Kinara has done great great guns in the last couple of months, but we'll have to re-pick that up. But how now do we do a full a la carte menu like Courtney was saying, or are we going to bridge that down into just some of the favorites? We definitely are starting with the leaner menus, and whether we get them back to the larger menus that we had, I'm not sure, but we'll see how that dictates as we go through.
Evelyn, I think you wanted to come in on this.
Yes. I mean, from what I'm hearing, in general, the panelists here are very, very bullish about, wanting to travel when the economy reopens and get on the next flight when the flight routes open. But to be very, very realistic, I think until a vaccine for COVID-19 has been found, and until we're very, very sure that the countries that we want to travel to do not have the second and the third wave of infections, the reality is that it may not be the spirit is willing, but the flesh, is weak, because you don't know what's out there.
No, absolutely. I think that certainly everyone, as you said, everyone really wants to get out there, but until they can guarantee their own safety, or until they can come back to their country and not have to quarantine for 2 weeks and miss work, etc., staycations could certainly be the way forward. Samantha, I wanted to ask you, in terms of staycations, you touched on earlier, pools being open, etc. What would a person look for in a staycation at the moment? And again, in terms of bringing food into it as well, and what more needs to be done to help people want to take staycations here?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're dubbing it daycation, aren't they now, where you actually get a day room as well as beach and sort of lunch access as well. So that gives you the flexibility of going back to your room to change, rather than have to sort of use public facilities for that. So that's an interesting model. I still go back to the fact that for that really to pick up, given the heat here, I mean, it could work in countries, in like other countries like Lebanon or Beirut, for instance, where it's a beautiful summer. But you need those pools to really open up as well. But yes, local staycations will continue to rise. Obviously, those hotels that have in-room pools or in-villa pools will benefit. But I think the moment that you make the decision to fly, whether you go a country close by or further afield, actually makes no difference, because sometimes it might even be cheaper to fly further away. I think the other point that I'd like to bring in, though, as well, is flexibility. When people are making staycation, for instance, bookings, the flexibility to be able to cancel is key. And there was actually, I saw a survey actually that Abercrombie and Kent and Cox and Kings did, that cited over 80% said flexibility without charges was one of the most important factors when it came to booking a holiday in the future. And we're already seeing that with the bigger hotel chains, I'm sure Jebel Ali hotels as well, that they are giving you that. So I think that will be a key factor and a key change in the industry moving forward.
Now we're into the final 10 minutes, so again, I can ask if anyone wants to send any questions through to the panelists. It's your last chance to do so. Courtney, you brought up Noma earlier and how they've pivoted, that word that we use so often these days about the F&B industry, but they've pivoted, they've changed what they're doing. Where else have you seen that around the world, and kind of what's intrigued you?
I mean, look, you have the range. You have Masa with their $800, take-home thing. There will always be this market for the kind of higher end, but kind of more closer to home, to see somebody like LPM make the transition to have an at-home experience, or Boca's just offered, I think, their most authentic version. I think I've not tried it yet, but La Taqueria, it feels in their spirit, and it feels like they took the time to do the research to be true to their brand, to put forward the food that they want to put forward, instead of just, oh no, we have to be on, an aggregator and we have to get our food out there. So I'm really curious to see what Omar and his team have done. I guess it's a challenge for everyone right now. There's no right answer. And to protect your brand, to keep your customers, your current customer base, your future customer base happy. Look, in 6 months, who knows what this looks like. I hope, at the same time, and I might say something controversial, I think Dubai was overdue for a bit of a reset. We have a lot of choice here, maybe too much choice. I don't want to see anyone out of a job, but I do think a correction was coming. It's just weird that it came through this channel.
Yeah, as you said, sorry, Samantha.
Yeah, no, just to add on that, completely agree. The market was saturated. We would have seen closures anyway. They're probably doubled as a result of the crisis, but at least that gives the chance of the current restaurants a chance of survival.
As I said, we're into the last just over 5 minutes to go, so I'd like to kind of take a look at the future. Rob, perhaps if you could give us your perspective here. You mentioned being in Australia at the moment. What's the situation looking like there going ahead, and perhaps China as well? Obviously, they're a bit ahead of us in terms of having gone through this. So what does the situation look like in the future?
Well, the situation in China is interesting. I mean, they opened, a month ago in the very small predicament with, minimum numbers, and very quickly the demographics and the market was moving as quick as it possibly could. So they actually went from a very restricted, very careful environment to being a little bit more carefree. Restaurants filling up and getting to numbers now where they can actually be financially successful. Australia is just opening up pubs and clubs this week on minimal numbers. They've seen great response here to people, especially wanting to get out and, in Australia, you can consume alcohol anywhere, anytime normally. So it's quite easy to get anything you want at home anyway, and same with China. So it's a little bit different to Dubai, but people still want that social interaction, like Samantha was saying. People crave that, needing to experience something from sitting at a bar, having the service element, like Courtney said, having the restaurant experience. People are wanting that. The problem here is that, you know, they're still only on very minimal numbers, so it's not financially viable for them to be open. But like a lot of us, even in Dubai, we realize we have to get open to, one, maintain ourselves in the market, and two, to start creating the experiences that people want. But, you know, we need to get to a decent amount of numbers where it can be financially viable again. You know, for example, Motorino is, you know, it's a restaurant built to do 150 covers, 100 covers, 80 covers to 100 is when we're making profit. Anything under that, you know, it's depends on the day. But we, you know, most of us with the restaurants, we need to do volume through them to be financially successful. So I think that moving forward, like the girl said, restaurants are going to have to be savvy to be financially successful. They're going to have to look at their model. They're going to have to be true to their brand, but they're going to have to make sure that they have that financial model right to make it work for the future. So, you know, for example, it used to be that some restaurants would have an overcapacity of staff due to different employment, labor industry from different parts around the world in Dubai, but that won't be as cheap as it was in the past. And as Samantha said, a lot of people are going to be out of work coming forward. So we're going to have leaner, meaner, very focused driven food and beverage in Dubai for sure.
Is there any specific lessons, perhaps positive or negative, coming out from China and the way they reopened that you think we can learn from?
I think the positive thing is that, you know, everyone's had a break and they're coming back with a lot of new energy. You know, all our team are excited to get back into their restaurants, and I think that's great. And I think food and beverage people everywhere are excited to get back. I mean, we love people. That's what we do. We try to make people happy in our restaurants most of the time. We don't always get that right, but, you know, we're there to make people happy. We're there to give experiences, and we love that. So the energy of people, you know, our teams coming back into their restaurants is fantastic. You know, they're looking, you know, we have our managers and us assessing everything we do, absolutely everything, which means now from a hygiene standard to every single process, every product we purchase, you know, we're trying to look at everything, which I think, you know, sometimes, you know, in some older hotels and restaurants, they may have just gone along with a system that has worked and has been financially successful, but now they're looking and reassessing everything. So I think the positive is that you get to look at something as a new experience. You know, we're coming back as opening new restaurants again because we've been closed for a period of time, and normally food and beverage never closes. Hotels never close. It's you know, it's quite an insane period of time. I mean, we've got to look back at this one day like, what the hell just happened? And, you know, we're already blinking about like what's going on and what happened, and now we're coming out of it. But I think the positive thing is that, you know, people will be invigorated. They'll have a new lease on life. They'll be looking at their restaurants as a new experience. You know, like Courtney and Samantha both said, there'll be different experiences they will do in their restaurant. Bok is a prime example of those guys looking at their market straight away. And most of the restaurants and everybody I know in all around the world are looking at their business, what they've done in the past, and what they'll do moving forward into the future.
Yes, crazy times is definitely one way to sum it up. Evelyn, if I can just come in the last minute or two now. So Evelyn, if you could just kind of sum up for us the mood in Singapore in terms of F&B, is the industry still positive looking forward?
We are all looking forward very, very much to reopening of restaurants. The chefs can't wait, and, you know, diners, we just want to dine out with a vengeance. But having said that, you know, we all know that, you know, over time the recession is looming, and we don't know how it's going to look like, what it's going to look like, but people are losing jobs throughout the world, and while we all want to dine out, we may dine out excessively for a couple of months after restaurants reopen, but the reality may sink in after a couple of months. And if people are losing jobs, they cannot afford to dine out. So that's just something to keep in mind. At the same time, you know, we do want to support our F&B.
Absolutely. Samantha, again, just very quickly to wrap up, are you positive? Do you see some good coming out of this situation at the end?
Yes, I do. I think sort of key sort of trends that will come out are things like affordability, a return of more sort of comfort, soul food. What I would love to see is the scrapping of the 30% alcohol tax to make drinking out more affordable. I mean, that really, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And that will definitely encourage more dining out. But I do think that it's not the government or municipalities that are going to decide when the consumer or the customer is going to come back. It's actually the customer. They need to be happy to, less fearful, obviously have that disposable income to return. And hence why I also think, yes, we're seeing an increase now because everyone's been cooped up. Alcohol's now available. But I think it might be short-lived. And also, restaurants are asking for rent deferrals. Some may not be paying rent, very few until September anyway, so there's no reason for them to open. And by holding back as well, they're more likely to get rent waived until sort of September time at least.
So thank you. I've been told that we have to wrap up. We've gone over time, I'm afraid. So thank you so much, Samantha, Courtney, Evelyn, and Rob for being with us today and sharing your expertise. A very fantastic session. I'm sure we had over 320 viewers. So amazing. Thank you very much to everyone involved. Thank you to the audience for taking part. Thank you to the panelists. And yes, a fantastic session. Thanks to everyone involved, and see you all soon.